It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Take Command podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. And Logan, hope everybody had a happy Mother's Day as folks are listening to this, hopefully coming off a fantastic weekend. And we're actually going to have a mom on the show on Thursday, Mina Kimes. She's got a little one running around. So don't forget that Mina's coming on the show on Thursday. But today we'll answer a couple of mailbag questions, Logan, and talk about Rookie Minicamp, which you went to on Saturday.
Yeah. And, obviously looking forward to having Mina on the show. That's always going to be a great time. But Rookie Minicamp is a funny deal. You know what I mean? Because I think everyone thinks it's this really grand thing. It's about an hour. They do a warm-up. They do a little bit individual. They do one competitive period. And I'm going to put air quotes on the competitiveness of it because it's just 7-on-7. And so it's really hard to kind of get a feel for players and athletes. And I think people say, well, what is the benefit of Rookie Minicamp? And I would say it lets you kind of get, for some of these like tryout guys specifically, like I think we talked about this maybe leading in. It's like really hard for a tryout guy to make it. Yeah. But it does let you kind of get a feel for the guy, how they're wired, what they're, how they study. And I think that that's something that you can get out of it when you're watching practices, just like general modus operandi for the individual. Do they look the part generally? And do they show anything, maybe a little bit more, a little bit upside? And I think that's, again, kind of if you ever get a chance to watch Rookie Minicamp, like that's really what it is. You're not going to be able to be like, oh, so-and-so had a pick or so-and-so did this or that was an amazing tackle. Like they're in soft shells. They have helmets on. It's basically just a warm-up. You know what I mean? Like that's really what it is, like an extended warm-up with some football stuff. But it does let you kind of get a feel for the kid and what's going on in terms of their mental wiring. So.
Right, and they're in for the week or the weekend, so you get a little bit of classroom
like 2
time.
days, 3 days?
Yeah, you get a little bit of classroom time because you have to be able to install, like you have to have plays to run, even if it's a very, 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 very slim playbook. So you get to see how these guys learn. You get to see how they adapt. You get to see how they respond to feedback on the field. How coachable are you? Like you get that kind of stuff, but like, are you a good NFL football player? You're not answering that question at all. What you're really trying to answer is like, could this guy potentially maybe, if I squint and see it, become an NFL good, even in a decent NFL football player?
Yeah, and it's funny the things you're like looking at. I was watching the special teams drill, and so obviously you're kind of keeping an eye on guys that just have like, there's an effort, there's an energy, there's a pop to their play. And one of the guys that stood out to me was Trey Amos, right? And he should stand out. He's your second round pick, but every single time, like the coach being like, hey, that's exactly what we want. That's the best rep of the day. Like, he's taking feedback from the coach. He's applying it to the drill, and he's executing with his tremendous physical ability. And again, like you kind of go back to your priors and you say, oh, well, we knew Trey Amos was a smart kid, right? We knew he was like, he kind of played in multiple systems. He's like a football. He's been exposed to a lot of football. And so it makes sense that he'd have a really good player's ear for coaching, right? And so that's always really good. And then the safety from, where's he from? Jackson State. Is that correct?
Rob McDaniel.
Yeah. He, like, you're watching him do the bag drill where they like kick set on the punt team and they they strike the bag, and he has a good feel for the stab arm and the bag when he strikes it. It's got a really good pop to it. So you're like, okay, there's a guy that has some good play strength and has a good feel for the rhythms of it. So, I mean, that's kind of stuff you're looking for. You're just kind of looking for like, hey, these are guys that, like obviously Trey Amos is getting verbal confirmation that he's doing a good job in the drill. But then, with the safety, for example, it's more like, hey, like, he's showing a physicality in the context of this that you're like, oh, this is pretty solid. So
yeah, for sure. They signed on Friday. So this was before the first practice, the one that was initially going to be open, then got moved inside due to rain, and then they opened Saturday to the media instead. But before they could start camp, they actually signed a bunch of dudes. Just real quick, the listed names. And then I want to run through kind of how everybody looked. Because the other thing, Logan, about seeing these guys, and you've had a chance for the draft picks, I guess, to see them in person before, not in football pads, because you've had a chance to interview a bunch of them on Command Center. But the first time you like see guys in a uniform, even if it's shorts and shells, you're like, oh. And one of the things you texted me was like, yeah, Conerly's huge. And you're just like you're an NFL sized player versus other guys where you're like, oh, I see why you were maybe a UDFA. But the list of guys, just so people haven't, this could change by the end of the week, where they cut a guy and bring in someone else or whoever. But Cam Arnold, Ricky Barber, the defensive tackle, Ja'Cory Brooks, the receiver from Louisville, who we talked about last week, Ventrell Cypress is a corner, Jacoby Jones, receiver, Ale Cajo, another UCLA linebacker, if I'm remembering correctly. Rob McDaniel, the safety we just talked about. Timothy McKay, who is a guard who I saw on the side. He's got his arm was in a sling.
He tore his pec benching at his pro day.
Oof. So,
but I mean, it's to me, like, I think I said this somewhere else, but he's kind of a guy that could have been drafted, but obviously with the injury isn't.
Yeah.
So he's a nice guy to get in the program for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So he's on the 90, and if he can recover from that torn pec, and who knows, maybe they even put him on like PUP or whatever, and he just he basically gets a redshirt year to be around the building and rehab, and then to see if it's a free draft pick almost for next year. Trey Rucker, the safety, and then Carlin Viggers, the corner, who we talked about as well last week. So those are the UDFAs who they signed to the 90-man roster going into the weekend, Logan. But let's start out with the draft picks. Josh Conerly, what'd you see from him? I know, again, it's not much. There's no competitive situations for the O-line, D-line, because it's just the 7-on-7. But what'd you see from Josh Conerly, how he moved on the football field in person, anything else that stood out?
Yeah, I think obviously he's kind of touted as being this great athlete, so you want to see a certain amount of athleticism, and you see that. Like, one of the drills that I really enjoyed watching was they have him do like a pull path, or like they work like a combination to the second level, so they're kind of working in a space, and they take one of those big blue physio balls, sometimes they're black, and then they roll them across the ground, and they kind of bend down and pick it up as they're running. And so it's a good way to kind of see how people work the timing of their feet, how they kind of can bend and sink their hips while running full speed, which is something that's really important for offensive linemen. And you kind of watch them all go through. And Conerly would come up, and each one prior, there's like a little bit of a hiccup. There's a trip. They kick the ball. And then Conerly comes up on all of his reps and was literally just like about as smooth as I've ever seen it done. So like, that's a good sign, right? You're just checking that athlete box. They did some pass pro stuff where, again, like, you see his quick feet. Everyone's familiar with the Conerly challenge at this point. Like, those feet are live and they're real in terms of watching him on the field. And I actually was impressed with how big he looked. Like, I've met him. We did the first interview right after he got drafted, and he's 315, but he doesn't feel like he's like a thin 315, And so seeing him on the field in his pad, like, that's a crazy thing to say, I know. But seeing him on the field in his pads, you're like, oh, like, he's a big dude. He looked like one of the bigger guys out there. And they had a guy from Mississippi State who was 330, and they looked about the same size. So again, like, I think thinking about him continuing to grow, continue to get more kind of muscularity to his body is going to be cool. But the athlete was definitely there. And that's always like, that's kind of the simplest box to check. But at least he didn't look like the Tin Man out there, which is something that I've seen happen before in minicamp.
Yeah, for sure. There's two things in there that you said that reminded me of Trent. One is just a story from Trent, but the second one is what you said last. We're like, you didn't realize how big Trent Williams was until he was in uniform, or you were standing right next to him, because he's so fluid as an athlete. He's just like walking around. You're like, oh yeah, that's a big man. And then, like, I remember one time I was walking in the locker room like shoulder to shoulder with him, except for my shoulder is not at his shoulder because I'm only 6 feet tall and he's larger. And you're just like, God. And then, like, you'd see him come out of the tunnel in pads, and you're like, oh, that's Trent Williams. The other thing that I remember Trent telling me at one point is, even for him at his athleticism, like the greatest athlete probably to ever play left tackle, he's like, hitting little dudes in space is the hardest thing I do.
Right.
It's so hard. You have these little guys that are trying to juke you. You're out there full speed trying to block, and like, it was fun for Trent because when he hit, like, it just was on all the highlight reels, and like he'd be out there killing dudes. But it's, when you talked about Conerly having an athleticism and a coordination at full speed that other guys don't have, like, that is an elite trait. And not saying that Conerly's going to do it at Trent's level, because no one else ever has. But obviously the guys who can do that at a high level in space, that's a huge thing, especially in this run game with all the GT pulling and GT counter and all the GT everything that these guys do, where that tackle is out there in space. All right, Trey Amos. You talked about him a little bit already in the special teams drills, but I also know that he stood out to you a little bit with what he can do on defense.
Yeah, they do that, obviously the special team stuff was excellent. Just to see a guy who's locked in, like, correct shoulder on the tackle. They're not tackling anybody, but the bag's there, and they approach the same way. They're in good position. They run the hoop the right way, getting the feedback from the coach. That's good. And again, it's not going to say he's going to be a Pro Bowler, but it's just like good to see that box get checked. He's taking coaching. And then they do that drill where they kind of imagine there's a receiver towards the sideline. They've got their hand out. They say ball, and they turn around, they catch it. And so it's kind of cool. You get to watch everybody go one after another. And it's always good because I try to sit kind of far away, like up on the hill, so I can see everything.
Yeah.
And it's always good when you say, who the heck is that guy? Because you can't see the number necessarily until they get back in line. You're like, oh, that's Trey Amos. Like, that's a good sign, right? Your first round pick should feel and move at a different caliber, or second round pick, excuse me.
Yeah.
Should be a little bit different than the rest of those guys. And I felt like that's the vibe I got from Trey Amos. Just the way he tracked the football, even in the coverage, like when they would kind of did like skelly coverages, like when they're they get the scout team defense out there and they run offensive routes and they kind of match. Just, you could tell he was locked in. It was a good day for him. And again, it's
one day, it's rookie minicamp, and he's probably one of the best 2 players out there. So he should have a good day, but at least he had the good day.
Yeah. And like, again, like I've seen, you go out there and you're like, ooh. Like, I think, honestly, like I think about Brandon Sheriff the first time I played with Brandon Sheriff. And Brandon Sheriff's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. But the first week he played tackle, I was like, oh no. Like he just, it was a little bit slower. It wasn't up to the speed. It wasn't quite. And then obviously they moved him to guard, and then the rest is history. But there is a little bit of I think, consternation until they get the guy in the building. And so for both those guys to look and move the way they're supposed to move, I thought was appropriate. And again, it wasn't like they're just, I'm just kind of subjectively evaluating. It's like he's the one that's always catching the football. He's the one that's able to turn and open his hip the right way. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there were some things there empirically to take away from that.
All right, Jalen Lane, 4th round pick. By the way, if you want a little bit more on Jalen, I talked to his special teams coordinator, Virginia Tech, on the show on Friday, Stu Holt. So Stu was great. Caught Stu on the golf course. So he took a hole off and was willing to talk to us. So that's a good man right there. Appreciate it. Also helps your score. Hey, just those shots didn't happen. I don't know why I shot 5 better today than I usually do. But no, Stu was great. So if you want to check that out in the Hoffman Show podcast feed, you can do that there. But Logan, what'd you see from Jalen on Saturday?
So obviously the first thing you see is him catching punts, and they've got 5 dudes here that can catch punts, and they all kind of go up and do it different ways, but just kind of the confidence that he catches it with, like how he hits it downhill, like all those little things you want to see and they're doing it on air. So again, it's don't sell the farm on him yet, but it's good to see him do that. Yeah.
I will say Stu said that he's the most fearless returner he's ever seen. And so I know it's against air and it's whatever, but like the fact that stood out to you, and that's one of the things that his coach and other evaluators have seen. Like, I think it's pretty cool that you saw that like in a drill on air where you're just like,
and just to give you an
confidence
example
in how it goes. Yeah.
And why I would say that is like some guys get under there and they have to get right under the football. And when they catch it, they really bend their knees and sink their hips, and they really absorb the ball in a way, and because it makes it hard for them to run afterwards. He'd get up there and he catches it kind of with a greater knee angle, like he's kind of standing tall, and so he can just hit it. Like you can just tell, like he's ready to go. There's no deep basket catch. There's no off angle. It's like I'm lined up, and even if I'm not perfectly lined up, I can hit this thing downhill. So even though he catches the ball, and again, it's 6 reps, 7 reps, so there's nothing like crazy about it. But I think that's a good sign, and that shows up on film at Virginia Tech. The other thing is like watching him run routes. I think he's got a little bit of, and this is something I thought again, like when we were talking about him, like just a little bit of stiffness, right? And sometimes those super fast guys are really a little stiff, but catches the football well. The thing that I kind of took away, kind of the most important skill, most important quality from him is, dude, he is locked in. He's locked in. Every drill's important. He's catching the football. He's finishing. Like, he's going to be a good pro. Like, you see the coach's kid of his background, and I'm like, at a minimum, he's going to be a good special teams player, but like, he's going to continue to get better, right? He's like, for example, there was a couple guys there that were tryout guys, right? And there's one guy in particular we'll talk about in a second who I thought did a great job of this, but other guys, there's just like a lack of urgency. And with Jalen Lane, he was urgent all the time. And I think that's something that you say, okay, like this is why this guy is who he is. This is why you take him in the 4th round. And again, like, that's what I like to see too. I like to see guys that are locked in, checking boxes. This is important to you. And that's another really good thing about rookie minicamp. It's like, yeah, you're a draft pick, you're on the team, like whatever, but to see that like we're locked in, this is important. Yeah. We're getting better today. That's important also. So
yeah, this is your first day at work. Treat it like such. And Jalen Lane did. All right, what about your boy Kane Madrano?
Yeah, man. I mean, he just is like a different mover. You watch. I think they had 5 or 6 linebackers there. And he just is like a different cut of guy. You know what I'm saying? Like they did like a drill where you got to backpedal and open up and catch the football, and like his ability to like adjust and like kind of contort to catch the ball. They did this drill where they're doing back pedals and then have to backpedal under the chute and then run out of it. And so what you'll see is guys like dip their head, their butt will come up, and it's a tough drill. Like I've done it as a blocker. Like it's very uncomfortable under there to keep that kind of pad level. And again, like to his athleticism, like it looks like there's nothing there. It looks like he's just kind of skating. So again, the athletes there, I did think he did have there was a learning curve in the punt drill that they were doing pre-practice, like kind of just, hey man, like make sure we're stabbing the inside hand. And as a guy who did punt team for a long time, you can see it, you can feel it. Like that hand should shoot out there. Because if you're playing guard, for example, on the punt team, your inside hand, if I'm playing the right guard, my left hand is actually helping the center get to his block. And if I don't put my hand out there, the weakest part of the protection is the center. So I need to trust that he needs to trust me that my hand's out there, and then I need to get to my work secondary. A lot of times in college, because of the rules, they have this kind of free release punt. The guys just don't have that skill set developed yet. So he'll figure it out. He's a smart kid. They're going to get him right because he's going to be a great special teams player here. There's no doubt in my mind. But, the athletes there, the urgency's there. But obviously the technical accumulation is still new to these guys. And that's why it's great to get the rookie minicamp in, because you can kind of start laying the foundation for some of that stuff.
For sure. And then last but not least, amongst the draft picks, how about Bill?
Yeah, I think of all the positions that are like toughest to evaluate, it's the running backs, because there's like, yeah, you look good in the bag.
It's like a training camp practice. You score on every play.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you look good and they don't even do team run. They do like individual. So he's with the running back coach the whole time. They do routes on air, and then they do 7-on-7. And none of those things are things like, again, you want to see them catch the football well, obviously. You want to see them look good in the bag drills, obviously. But there's no blitz pickup. None of the physical elements of the position are there for you to look at. I think that's the thing about it that is tough with a running back specifically, right? It's just like, yeah, you look super fast. You look like you've got great feet, and good. You should have those things if you're an NFL running back. But then it's like, as they get into training camp, you get to see more of that physicality. So I think you look fine. I'm not going to make any declarative statements about what he is or what he isn't, because I want to see him with the pads on, and I want to see him get downhill. I want to see him pick up a blitz. I think he can do all those things, but rookie minicamp for running back specifically is kind of like, okay,
it's
what are we doing?
It's a workout. It's not It's not a football practice.
And to be fair, like for all those guys, like the movement skills are all there, the professionalism's there, and that's exactly what you want to see. Yeah. But people change when the pads come on, and I think that's something that I always have to remind myself is like, you can look great in shirts and shorts, but when the pads come on, like that's when we're playing the game. And Santana is always so good about reminding me of this, is because like we go out and watch practice every day, and it's like, oh, look at this guy move, look at that catch, look at this break on the football by the DB. And Tana's like, man, like this is great, and it's good to kind of see this like preliminary evaluation, but shoot, like they're not playing football yet. And I think it's always a good reminder, especially with a rookie minicamp setup like this.
Yeah, for sure. All right. With that caveat, in fresh on our minds, is there any of the UDFAs that stand out that you want to talk about? We talked about McDaniel a little bit already, but whether it's more on him, something that you haven't said yet, or that you think is important, or any of the other guys.
The guy from the International Pathway Program, TJ Magaraga. I don't know how to say his name, but it's like,
sorry, TJ.
He's from Nigeria. He looks good. He looks big. He looks fast. He looks urgent. Like watching him do the pass rush drills, he catches your eye. As a guy that's like kind of twitched up, has some good movement skills. In the punt drill, he's just like every play, he's like giving it all, which I like to see, and I'm not saying he's going to make the team, but like the body's there, the mentality seems to be there, and I want to see what he looks like with pads on. But he's a guy that caught my eye. I mentioned Rog McDaniel.
Just real quick. So for background on, I don't know that I'm going to do any better on the name, but Magura Nyangwa. And again, like TJ, we'll try to get your name right. Sorry to not have the pronunciation guide in front of us. But he's from Zimbabwe, 22 years old, former rugby player. And the thing is, he's 22 years old. Like he's a young dude, and so to know that you get basically a free practice squad spot, like he's gonna be around this year. And that tends to be how those international pathway players work. The chances that he turns into Jordan Mailata are very slim. A guy who like bona fide NFL player, nevertheless one of the best at his position, but a guy that, you know, if he's playing rugby and at a professional grade level, like, you know, the athlete is there and he's so young. So it's going to be fun to watch him develop. He's only, you know, he's listed like 222 pounds. So if he's going to play defensive end, like we're gonna your main job is going to be to stay in the cafeteria, in the weight room, to get twitched up or stay twitched up, but at a weight that you can attack an offensive tackle. But it's going to be fun to watch him.
He definitely looks like kind of like McGee a little bit, like kind of this rocked up hypermuscular build, which is, so I don't know if he weighs 220, but he looks bigger. You know, he's
listed at 220. Bigger. He could have already gained 10 pounds, 15 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. But again, like, he's a guy that definitely caught my eye. I already mentioned Rob McDaniel, the safety, just like his physicality. He just seems like a dark horse candidate to maybe make the squad. Ja'Cory Brooks was another guy that stood out to me. And you talk about receivers, get to watch them all kind of one after another. Like the craftsmanship of what he did, like watching him in 7-on-7, the releases, finding the space, the route mechanics in terms of how to break down, how to stem a route, like that showed up for me. And so those were probably the two guys that I thought stood out the most. Ventrell Cypress was hurt, so he didn't practice. So him and Timothy McKay didn't practice; they were on the side. But the two guys that I mentioned, I thought the three guys that I mentioned look pretty solid. And again, it's one step. It's one baby step in the right direction. But just based on the first day of practice that I saw, I thought those were some guys that deserved a shout out.
All right, so shout out to them. We'll see a bunch of those dudes at OTAs, which are towards the end of the month. And that's kind of the next big thing. So there's your rookie minicamp recap. Let's get to some mailbag questions. Take command. I'm Craig Hoffman. He's Logan Paulson. Mailbag time. That's what we do early in the week. You can get your questions in at hoffmanshow.com. You use the contact link, type in your question, then we read it, and the best ones, the most creative ones, the most relevant ones, they make the air. You can also hit us on Instagram at hoffman.sports and at Logan_Paulson82. And Logan, this one came from our guy Steven. I've gotten versions of this in our YouTube comments as well, and Instagram comments, TikTok comments, especially in response to my chat with Todd McShay. Because Todd said, hey, Conerly might play guard this year. And I don't know how locked in Todd was on kind of the plan here versus kind of what he thought was possible. But people freaked out. People were like, oh my God, how could they say that? And Steven asked, I thought, what was a good version of the question that will allow us to have what is an important conversation about the Commanders' first round pick. A question about Josh Conerly, a position he's most likely to play this year and beyond. I'd be surprised if he isn't their right tackle, but I've heard several analysts that I respect think he's more of a guard. I know you and Logan have broken Conerly down extensively, but I have a specific question about this I don't know if I've heard addressed yet. If Conerly's perceived weakness right now is play strength, why would that be better at guard? Intuitively, I'd rather have him blocking 260 to 280 pound edge rushers or someone lighter like Micah Parsons than someone like Dexter Lawrence or other big, strong guys in the middle. If strength is an issue, if you guys can shed light on this, that'd be great. Thanks, Steven.
That's a really good question, and I think it brings up a lot of interesting kind of thought experiments, thought processes about what it means to play offensive line in the NFL. So I'll start with the first part, which is play strength, and play strength at guard and play strength at tackle. And I think there's this conception or perception that you have to be really strong to play guard, and that's true to a certain extent. I think you think about your Larry Allens, for example, like these just bears of men who are just incredibly powerful. But the thing about guards that I think people often overlook is their foot quickness, right? So they tend to be really kind of twitched up, and if you are a twitched up athletic guard, you can get to the spot before those big guys. So in the run game specifically, it can be very, very helpful. Also, remember that when you're at guard, there's less space. You're not as far from the rusher. So usually, if I can be really quick out of my stance, kind of explode out of my stance, get to my spot, get hands on, I can stop the car before it starts running in a way that I can't do at tackle. So I do think that you can actually get away with not being quite as strong at guard. And obviously this is very system dependent. If you're in a heavy gap scheme, kind of, we got to move this guy vertically off the spot. Think, the LA Rams, they got a bunch of big offensive linemen, guys that are all over 330. Part of that is because they run a lot of tight zone. They run a lot of gap scheme runs, run a lot of duo, and that shows up, right? You got to be able to kind of move the dudes off the spot. However, I've had a lot of experience over the course of my career with guards that are just quick. They're just really quick, and it allows them to cover up their play strength, because those big defensive tackles oftentimes are so reliant on being big and strong that they can't move as well laterally. So you can put yourself in position to kind of win that. So again, like in a situation with Conerly, like obviously I think his long-term home, whether it's next year or not, is going to be right tackle for this team. But if he does play guard, I think it might even cover up a little bit of the play strength, as long as you can stay balanced and as long as you can be quick-footed and use your length, which he has and he can do. So I think that's where I'd say, like, don't always think of it as like, oh, guards need to be big and kind of lumbering. The reason people tend to prioritize tackle, and this is again kind of going back to the original question, is because it's just harder to find the body type. It's harder to find these body types, and people say you got to be tall and you got to move like a basketball player, but you got to be super strong, and you got to be really, really strong at tackle because there's a longer runway, right? Like these bigger edge rushers like Rashad Gary, Myles Garrett, they can generate a ton of force, right? Because what's force? It's mass times acceleration. So they have a longer runway to accelerate into contact. So you have to be really good with your hips and sinking contact. You have to be really good with the timing of your punch. And that's why it's really hard, I think, to find a premier or a starting caliber right or left tackle in the NFL than it is to find a guard. I think it's just the nature of the phone booth of the position makes it a little bit easier. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think I touched on most of the points there.
No, I think the play strength thing is that's the one where like your insight as someone who played the game and works with offensive linemen and like understands that is different, because I think it makes a ton of sense for the average fan to just be like, okay, would you rather have a strong guy block Dexter Lawrence or Micah Parsons? And it's like, Dexter Lawrence. And it's like, actually, Micah Parsons has a 4-yard head start and Dexter Lawrence has to go right now, which is why some of these really quick interior players who are explosive right now, Aaron Donald, Dexter Lawrence, et cetera, are the best interior pass rushers, is because they can generate that power immediately. Jalen Carter can generate, not only are they quick enough to get around guys, but they can generate that power immediately because of how twitched up they are on the inside, versus like otherwise, why would have Haloti Ngata not been the greatest sack man in the history of the NFL? Because he's so damn strong. Well, it's because his strength was used in other ways to be a highly effective, borderline Hall of Fame level football player, but it wasn't pass rush. And there's a reason for that. I think the other part of this question, though, in terms of the guard tackle and like hearing some of the commentary, especially after I had McShay on last week and he said what he said, is I think the most likely outcome is Josh Conerly is going to start at right tackle and Brandon Coleman's going to start at left guard. I think that's the leader in the clubhouse. That's the odds-on favorite, whichever analogy you want to use. But it's not set in stone, and it could go the other way. And I think people need to accept that and be okay with that and be fine with that, because one, the long-term plan, you don't know, and you don't do long-term in the NFL very much. Like, of course, there's some long-term planning that happens, but this is such a year-to-year league that if Josh Conerly plays guard this year, or even the next couple of years, and then you try him at tackle. If he's an all-pro guard, maybe just leave him at guard long term. Sweet, we got an all-pro guard. But when Tunsil retires or moves on, you kick him outside. Okay, that could work. But like trying to figure that out now and saying like, what's the best thing for 3 years from now is how coaches get fired in this league. It's how you see your results get worse in this league. And so what they're going to do is they're going to let him probably take early. Like my guess is because he's the veteran and the incumbent, Andrew Wiley will get the first snap at right tackle in OTAs. We'll see what happens by training camp, but for no other reason other than seniority. And that's kind of how the league, how they want to build the program in terms of competition, is like, hey, that's our guy, go beat him. And there's a really great chance that Josh Conerly or Brandon Coleman could do that. And Conerly maybe is the second string right tackle on day one of camp. And then day two, maybe he's the first string left guard. And then he goes back, and they're going to take the time to teach those guys multiple positions and then ultimately let them compete, and the best man will win. Is my prediction that Conerly will win right tackle and Coleman will win left guard, and that some combination of Urbig, Wiley, and Allegretti will want competing for Cosme's place until he gets back at right guard? Yes, but it could go another way, and accepting that it could go another way is perfectly fine. And I get the consternation and kind of the vitriol towards anyone who doesn't say Conerly's the starting right tackle, but I think you'll be a much happier person if you don't have such a violent reaction to the concept.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also understand, like to this point, is that the NFL game is different than the college game. The rushers are different. They're stronger, they're better, they're faster. And so even though he has all the skill set to play right tackle or left tackle on paper, like it might not work out for him. I just talked about Brandon Sheriff. Like on paper, like he had all the things you needed. He was very athletic. He had good lateral movement. It just didn't jive for him. And I remember talking to him. It was probably his second year. And I said, how do you like guard? He said, oh, I love it. I just love it so much more because there's less space. I can just use what I'm good at, my quickness, my athleticism, my power to get guys off the spot. And I think that's where like this is like he might not be able to handle the variety of moves that he sees on the edge. He just might not. And so, hey,
and if Brandon Coleman can, then sweet. He can be a great guard and let Coleman play right tackle.
And it solves the problem, right? Because you get better athletes at multiple spots. And again, like I said, I ultimately think Conerly will probably start at right tackle, long term at some point for this team. But don't sleep on Brandon Coleman either. I mean, he ran a sub-5 flat 40. He has 35-inch arms. Like, when you look at who's got more tackly measurements, I know Brandon Coleman's got this kind of guard, kind of bulky body. But who looks more like a tackle, like they both have these crazy tackle measurements. So, and I think that's one of the things I look back on last year, and great job by this staff of kind of finding a guy that can do that for you. So don't sleep on him, right? Don't sleep on whatever amalgamation is the best, right? And I think it's okay also if he doesn't start week 1. I think that's also something fans need to be okay with, because as much as I like the prospect, as much as I enjoy watching his film, as much as I enjoy thinking about the ceiling of the player, it's hard for guys when they come to the NFL. It's a different animal. Like, speaking from experience, like you don't see the type of athletes. You see the type of athletes you see in the NFL every week once in college. Even if you go to a big school, even if you go to LSU or something like that, you see those dudes, those top flight, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett. Like, there's a guy on every team that you're like, oh,
Conerly saw Abdul Carter once.
Yes. And he did a good job. But like, he saw him once, right? And I think that's a great iteration of kind of how different the landscape is for pass protectors. And even in the run game, like, you got to deal with just a different animal. Like, it's always crazy taking a college defensive end that I do study and evaluation for and then bringing them to the NFL, because all the stuff that they do in college doesn't work in the NFL. The tackles are too big, they're too long, they're too locked in on the technique. Even bad ones in the NFL are good compared to college offensive linemen. And I think that's just something you have to understand. Like, it's not going to be a easy transition. I mean, it could be, right, which would be great, but there are obstacles in the way of this. And I think, like, that's why you say, oh, he's wired the right way, he's going to study, he's going to get better. All those things are true, but you want the best 5 on the field. I think it was ultimately what I come down on, because it's not always as seamless as it seems on paper.
For sure. There's a great clip that was going viral last week from the podcast 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, which is Carmelo Anthony's podcast, and they had Malik Neighbors on. And they asked Malik, like, hey, what's the difference between college and the NFL? And he goes, I don't want to say college was easy, because it wasn't. Like, LSU, the SEC, whatever. But like, the NFL, every dude is just that guy. Like, you got, they were having a good chuckle about, like, you got dudes in you got corners wearing 37, and that dude's still getting after it, because he's he's just trying to play for his job, play for his family, and he's really good. He's like, I catch a screen pass, and in college I could cut that thing back inside. Now I got these defensive ends coming out trying to kill me. He's like, I caught balls, and it's funny because on this one I think he's thinking about the Frankie Louvu hit that he took in the early season. Was it like week 2, week 3 last year? And he's like, I caught balls in areas of the field, and, it was like, oh, man, I'm going to get jiggy with it. And then I would just get blasted from nowhere. And, like, that's the NFL, because every dude is a freaking dude.
It's different, man. Like, I would watch a lot of college film for these college guys, right? And like when I'm doing the breakdowns for the draft, and you'll see a play, like I was watching Tyler Warren, right? And I saw him run this route and like jump up and catch the ball of this guy. I'm like, in the NFL, there's no way that happens. There's no way that happens. And it's a great college play. It's awesome to watch. But that dude in the NFL is not going to let you do that to him. He's got a big body your ass. He's going to be way more physical than you think. And it doesn't play, right? Even bad pass sets, like when you're watching pass sets or something and you're like, no way an NFL rusher let you get away with this kind of error? So understanding that it's a different game, the volume's turned up to 11, like, and that transition, I think a lot of people say, oh, he's for sure gonna be the right tackle. He might not be, and that's okay. You got a good athletic dude who's got some growth potential on your team. He can play guard, he can play tackle. It makes you better. I think that's the thing that fans should focus on, is his addition makes you better because it gives you more flexibility. Because think about last year, right? Like, I thought those 5 dudes played their absolute faces off. Like, they were punching above their weight class every single week. Kudos to that group. But the second there was even the hint of an injury, the group kind of fell apart. Now you've got some depth across the board. So even if he's just a depth piece, I know that's not ideal, him being the 29th overall pick. You want him to be a contributor. He is contributing to making your team better. And I think that's important to keep in mind here as well.
For sure. And, by getting a guy like Tunsil, like it lets you not have to chip as much. Like, there's a bunch of trickle downs to the offense. So in summary, in review, we don't want a million comments being like, you guys suck. He's going to play right tackle. We don't know yet. And it's okay to say we don't know yet. He's probably going to play right tackle. That's our odds-on favorite. But we'll see. The most exciting words in football podcasting. We'll see. Wrapping up here on Take Command, a couple questions on the way out. One more on the field football question for Logan Paulson, and then we got a fun one on the new stadium on the way out here, Logan. So first one comes from Michael Monaco, sent you this on Instagram. He says, hey, Logan, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about a certain player, Michael Wiley, who from what film I've seen looks pretty good. Do you see him at all getting into the rotation of running backs? Thank you, and I understand if you're not able to get back to me. Michael, we're getting back to you. On the pod. Wiley was actually, even though he's a second-year player, because he was on practice squad last year, was eligible to participate in rookie minicamp. So you actually got to see him this weekend. What'd you see, and what do you think of him going back to last year in training camp?
It kind of goes back to that point we just were talking about, where like even the fifth running back was like a dude in college, and he was out there and he caught a little swing pass, and I remember it was Kay Madrano was like taking an angle to go get him, and Wiley, who was a decent college player, like he's the practice squad running back for the Commanders, like gassed up the sideline and not just Kane, but every, like the safety, the corner, they all took a bad angle, and eventually they got him out of bounds. But it was like the speed of a guy who's been in the NFL for a year, the way he caught and got up the field, I was like, everyone's got to take a jump here. Everyone's got to take a step in terms of understanding what was good in college is no longer good at the NFL level, even in practice. And so to the question, like, I think he's a guy that I thought was interesting last year. I really enjoyed watching him in the preseason. And what I enjoyed watching about him was his ability to elevate runs. We talked about that when we were doing our running back evaluation for the draft, like his ability to make people miss in the hole, his ability to find the crease, his vision. I think it's going to be challenging. I think when you look at that running back room, it is crazy dense all of a sudden, like absolutely crazy dense. Like just going through, you got B-Rob, you got McNichols, you got Austin Eckler, you got Chris Rodriguez, who I think has a legitimate shot to kind of push for some more playing time. You got Bill, and you got Wiley, and all those guys are pretty gosh darn solid football players. And I think that's one thing about running back specifically that I think is really tough, is there's just a lot of high floor people at the position, right? Like, I don't think anybody thought like last year McNichols would come in and be a very serviceable starter for this team, right? A very serviceable role player, because no one had heard of him. But that's the nature of running back, right? Is like McNichols has been around for about 9 years now. Yeah. And
but I don't think he had played a snap since 2021.
He's been like a teams guy mostly, right? But like, It just shows you that like there are tough, smart, physical runners that are just everywhere. And so I think to the question about Wiley, like, I like what he brings. I like the way he catches the football. I like the way he runs the ball. But like, is he going to beat out one of those guys we just talked about? They just drafted Bill, and I know Bill's a 7th round draft pick, but in rookie minicamp, I thought, damn, they look about the same, And if you're going to bet on a guy, you're going to bet on the guy you drafted, probably, right? And even if it's just a 7th round pick. So I think he's got a long road to kind of make his name, but I do think he has a really nice physical skill set. And I think it's someone that should, like, you talk about camp when the pads come on, like, he's definitely someone I'm going to watch, because I definitely think he's got more ability than, like, you kind of forget about him, right? You forget about what he did last preseason, but he's got some ability, he's got some skill. So yeah, I want to see what that looks like. It's a running back's a tough position to crack usually.
Very. And last year I thought he had a chance to make the team. Like I bet you he was one of their final like 3 or 4 cuts. But he was right there with McNichols and all those guys. And it was also like a do they keep 4? And they wound up keeping. I might have even had him on a roster in one of the projections I did in August. And then I think someone like Colson Yankoff, who just was so good on special teams.
I think you did actually. I think you had him on the team, which was not a crazy thing at the time because he was good.
And it's harder to evaluate on the special teams value and things like that when you get down to 4th tight end versus 4th running back versus 5th linebacker versus 6th safety. Like that's what it's about. And, they wound up keeping a guy like Tyler Owens, and they wound up keeping Colson Yankoff. And those guys probably beat out Michael Wiley as much as Jeremy McNichols did. And so I think that's the question is like, did you spend your year getting better on teams? Because we know if he's on the team and he gets a shot at running the football, he's probably going to be decent. But are you either way better than decent at the NFL level, where you make it on the merits of being one of the best running backs, or is your combination of offensive and special team skill good enough that you're on the team more as a teams guy and then depth at your offensive or defensive position? And I think, I'm glad you brought up C-Rod too, because I get asked about him all the time and people are like, how come he doesn't get more run? And I'm like, I don't have a great answer for you other than it's hard. And I think sometimes you have a absence makes the heart grow fonder thing. And, if they switched being Chris Rodriguez and B-Rob, you'd be like, oh, I wish Brian Robinson was back because he's a little bit better. But there's not a huge gap between them because that's running back in the NFL as runners. I think the other part is what do you do out of the backfield? How reliable are you in pass protection? All that kind of stuff. And those some of the more nuanced reliability areas, I think, is where Chris Rodriguez at times has struggled maybe in the past.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, it's a couple things about Chris Rodriguez. One is I love watching him play.
Yeah.
I love the way he works. I love all that kind of stuff.
Great teammate.
So that being said, though, I do say he's not like a great practice player, and that's not to say he doesn't practice hard because he does. It's just his skill set, which is like being big and running downhill in the new landscape of off-season workout, does not flash. Like it just doesn't. Like because you can't run anybody over. Like the contact balance, which is his superpower, his ability to kind of explode through contact as a runner. It just isn't there, right? And so when you compare that, which doesn't always flash to like Wiley as a good point of comparison, or McNichols, or some of these guys that have more horsepower, more speed to their game, like even B-Rob, for example, he's a big, powerful guy. And I do think C-Rod has better overall contact balance than B-Rob. Like the way he run, like when C-Rod's running downhill, like he's one of the better power backs in the NFL. Now, there's a reason you don't see a ton of power backs in the league because the game is now a space game. And I will say this about B-Rob, he catches the football at an extremely high level, which I don't know if C-Rod does. He's got soft hands, but he's not a difference maker in the pass game. And so that's where if you're weighing B-Rob to C-Rod, for example, right? Like I like C-Rod a little bit better as a runner. I think he's a more consistent runner on a down-and-out basis, but that's not what the position is, right? It's how do you pass protect, how do you catch a football. And when I watch B-Rob catch the ball, like there's times where he catches it like a wide receiver, and having that on the field is very, very valuable. So I think that's the thing that C-Rod's negotiating. It's kind of some of the stuff that I negotiated in my career is like you're really good at one thing, right? But when you're really good at one thing, it lets teams put you in a box as like, hey, you're the short down back or you're the blocking tight end. It's about how does he cultivate and grow the other elements of his game over the course of the offseason to kind of say, hey, I deserve more, maybe not to be the starter, but to maybe be in McNichols' role this year or whatever that looks like. So that's something that I would keep an eye on with him. And it's the same thing with Wiley too. Have you grown up? And the one thing I wanted to say about Wiley before we move on is I think it's going to be especially hard for him to make the team this year on teams unless he's playing like coverage units. And what I mean by that is like you brought in Jalen Lane to return punts.
Yep.
Luke McCaffrey did a great job last year returning kicks. Austin Eckler did a great job returning kicks. So you got to kind of –
and Jalen can return kicks too.
You got to kind of bump out a starting kind of player at the spot, which I think is going to be a little bit more difficult for him this year.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I'll say about the running back room is all those dudes are on one-year deals. So B-Rob, Eckler, and McNichols, all the vets, they're expiring after the season. So from a cap standpoint, if you wanted to cut, like if one of them has a bad camp and you wanted to make Chris Rodriguez your starting running back over Brian Robinson, like will B-Rob get signed somewhere else immediately? Yeah, absolutely. Will Chris Rodriguez? Not necessarily. He was on your practice squad for most of the year last year. But if they truly believe he's the better player, you can make an argument to do it. I just don't predict that's going to happen. I just, from the contract standpoint, these guys, I think that's why there's so much attention on this room is one, I think there's obviously potential to grow if they could have found a stud somewhere, like if an Omarion Hampton had fallen to them. But two, it's also because there's no clarity on what the long-term plan is at that position right now. And it's probably something they're going to have to, almost certainly something they're going to have to address next offseason. But because of the plentifulness of running backs that are available, it's actually not that hard of a position to address. All right, last question for today's show, Logan, off the field, or perhaps part of the field. It'll make sense in a moment. Hey, Logan, mailbag question that's stadium related. From a player and now media perspective, what are some things you want to see in a new stadium that may be overlooked by the general public but are more important to players and media folks? So we get to be selfish with this question. We want a great press box, but no. What are some of the things that I think the player thing is more interesting, but then we can talk about media stuff on the back end too.
Yeah, a couple things. One is, this is kind of silly, I want a big locker room. Like there's sometimes like where even in at FedEx, which is not a small locker room, it's pretty decent size. Like just having a bigger space where you can stretch and work out, like do your kind of pre-game stuff in there. Having a nice wet room at the stadium would be awesome. Like they had a bunch of tubs at FedEx, but I do think that like they could probably have a permanent wet room back there, like where it's like there's a hot tub, there's a cold tub, like
some of the post-game recovery stuff. Yeah.
And even pregame, like I know guys like getting in the hot tub before the game starts. Kind of as you get older, man, you need every kind of advantage you can to kind of make yourself feel good. So I think those are probably two things in the locker room I think that would be good. And then obviously like not a long walk to the field. And then with regards to the stadium construction, I always preferred stadiums that felt like they were like coming down on top of you, kind of, like kind of vertically built, really down in on you. It made this environment of like we're in it, we're in the mix, we're in the fight. Really gets the crowd involved in a way. Like I played at the Rose Bowl, obviously, when I was at UCLA, and it the way it's built, it's cool, but it's kind of like the sound all kind of leaves, but like when you're in Seattle and it's like right on top of your head, like you're just like, oh, this is awesome. So I always appreciated stadiums that it felt a little bit, I don't want to say claustrophobic because it's a huge building, obviously, but like there was like it helped build an environment that
at some point the announcer's going to go, the fans feel like they're right on top of you.
Right. That's exactly right. And I always appreciate that. So obviously there's some technical stuff in the locker room that I would like to see as a player, but I always preferred that kind of like, because it helps obviously too, like when you're on offense and it's a little bit rowdy and, the defense can't get lined up, or when your defense is on the field and the crowd's really cheering, like I think there's something to that. So creating a building that embodies that home field advantage, I think would also be pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Seattle's cool because there's like literal engineering that went into how the sound bounces.
Yeah.
And so there's like, because of the way the awnings are, it like goes up, diagonal, across, and like everything centers on the field. And I remember seeing a diagram of it once being like, this is cool. I can't believe like human beings know how to do this. Science, math, stuff I couldn't do. I can be the loud part. I'm so good at being loud. I think from a media standpoint, my big thing is always like, what's the view? From the press box. Like this is a huge gripe with Northwest Stadium is it's a brutal place to watch a game. It's so hard to tell because we're kind of in the corner, and which is, you want to be either like, give me an end zone view or give me an all 22. Like I'm on the 50-yard line. And I can be high up. Like that's not the worst thing in the world. But I like to be able to, like feel like I can actually watch the game and take things out of it schematically, because that's what I'm there to work, to watch the game. And I feel like sometimes you wind up learning more when you then, this is how we watch the game. Play happens, it's out here, and then we all go and lean back and look up at the TVs in the press box so we can see what actually happened. And I would like to be able to not have to rely on a TV. I would say the other thing, if the stadium is going to be indoors, I would like an open press box. And press boxes are very mixed on this. I think more people like the open press box than not, but press boxes can be very sterile. And so I like to feel the game. My favorite press box that I've ever been in for an NFL game was the old RCA Dome in St. Louis. But because that was a dome and it was inside, they literally, like, the press box was literally open. There was nothing. You just like you were in seats. Not like fan seats, like they were more cubicle style without some of the walls, but like it was a row of desks in the stadium. And so when that place got loud, you could feel that. Because even in Dallas, where it's closed off, like they have the windows up and you can tell it's kind of loud out there, but you can't feel the atmosphere. And I think part of being there and reporting on games is being able to say, like, feel the atmosphere in a way that you can't on television. I want the experience of working a game to be better, allow me to provide better coverage than it can if I'm watching on TV. And so I think making sure I can see the game and being able to feel the atmosphere are like my top two things that I want. And then like good logistics of getting around, getting to and from the locker room. Like New Orleans is a nightmare getting to and from the press box after games. So like that part, but most of the modern stadiums take care of that stuff pretty well. So just those would be my three: is good sight lines, feel the vibe. Someone thought about logistics for more than 30 seconds after the stadium was done and went, oh God, we messed up.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm taking it from an analyst standpoint, like when I'm on the sideline, I always appreciate a big sideline, like when there's like a lot, like a long track, you know, because like the cheerleaders are there, the camera guys are there, everyone's running around, so it's always tough when it's like really narrow to the wall. So I always I'm trying to think who had a good one. Like Detroit was pretty solid. Like there's just like enough space where you can get a good spot and like see like you want to be able to watch the game. So yeah, I think all that kind of stuff, it feels so irrelevant to the actual stadium experience, but like for a media member, like those are things we think about. But ultimately, the number one thing I care about is that the fans have a great experience. You know, like when you go to some of these stadiums, it's like, holy cow, like they've got, you know, like it's like clean concourses. It's like really easy to get to your seat. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like that nice, visible jumbotrons. Like, and I know that's what you would feel the same way, but I think like that's the other thing too, that ultimately, like I can live with the other stuff. It's I want the fans to be in there absolutely losing their minds. And, you know, obviously winning games helps with that, but also making sure that the stadium is easily accessible and that it's bumping is great.
We're answering the question because Peter asked it, you know, making sure that it's great for players and fans. Like we're definitely last on the pecking order, but like it is nice when it is nice when it shows that we're thought of. And it's not like, okay, you're going to park on the east side. Your media entrance is on the west side to then walk halfway around the stadium to the east side press box. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Get your steps in, Craig. Why? You're a fitness guy. Get your steps in.
I'm getting my steps in when I work out. I came to work. If they can provide me a golf cart directly to my seat, I'll take it. Like I'm a lazy son of a gun when it comes to that stuff. So yeah, that's my logistical thing. And then, I mean, I think the other one for everyone, this is fans too. And I know that they've tried to work on this at the current stadium to the best that they can within the constructional limitations, but ingress, egress, getting in and out of the stadium, not being a nightmare, like for everyone, for players, for fans, for media, like that's always nice when they have that figured out. And obviously that's a big point of contention right now with how much parking will there be? What kind of metro renovations will happen? You know, what's the metro schedule going to look like? Will they add more trains? So there's like a million different things on that front that are going to be conversations over the next year as they finalize what this stadium looks like and then start construction. Hopefully, assuming this all passes in July or soon after in terms of city council and yada, yada, yada. All right, for more continuing coverage of that, we will still talk about it some here on Take Command, but we'll have plenty more on the Hoffman Show and, of course, on both of our stations, 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. So listen to all the council members, the mayor, and everybody else who comes to talk on our stations, on our shows. We'll be back on Thursday with Mina Kimes and a couple of other loose odds and ends. And then we'll be back early next week with another mailbag. So get your questions in. You go to hoffmanshow.com. You can hit me on Instagram at hoffman.sports or Logan at Logan_Paulson82. For Logan, I'm Craig. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you next time on Take Command.